Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're coming from the University of Vermont. We start all very things at 4:20 in the afternoon of this session. This is a session on computational social science. So there's an enormous amount of data out there in the world these days for scientists to learn things about. People writing messages on Twitter and typing things into Google. And talking on their mobile phones, and we have a great group of people here today to tell us about what they're learning about these rich data sets. First up today is Peter Dobbs, who's making a triumphant return to Snowbird after 12 years in absence. I convinced him to not use transparencies today. He wanted to.
That's what I use. That's what I use.
He is competing in the World Triathlon Championships in the fall, so he is very fast. If you want to catch him after this talk, you're going to have to run quickly. So
it's not true.
Peter's going to tell us about why language is happy. It's too slow.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm very happy about describing things, and I used to feel ashamed of that when I was a graduate student. And so I'm going to mostly tell you about things where we're describing. And science is describe plus explain, but we're getting there. So lots of things today. I want to, here's sort of an overview. So who are we? Are we bad guys or good guys? Do we, we tell a lot of stories about ourselves, and they vary enormously, right? So we have everything from Jainism to Ayn Rand's objectivism. How should you behave, right? And there's a lot about what's natural and what we should sort of ascribe to. So I'm not going to answer that today, but I'm just going to dig into it a little bit with language, because language is this sort of invisible thing to us most of the time. It's a bit like air is to us as well, and water is to fish, if fish could tell me what they think. So a couple of observations. So our great social technology is language, right? We're excited about Twitter and Facebook, but language is pretty good social tech. We were excited about books. They're good things too. But language is fantastic, and we spread our stories, of course, through language. So what's just lying around in language? And here's the question I want to get at, which is, what are the atoms, the words? So they're atoms, not molecules. Molecules are complicated, phrases, very complicated. They're scary for us. We're either very happy with very large text or just individual words. So today's going to be about individual words. So what's the emotional content lying around that people perceive, if you like, in words, in individual words? So I'm going to talk about English in particular, and then I'll show you some results we have. Pretty exciting stuff, I think, from 5 other languages. And so there's a key piece to this, is just the size of things, right? This matters so much in natural systems. It's often somewhat overlooked. Of course, we have Zipf's distribution. That's a big deal. But I think when it comes to emotional content in text, we sometimes forget this. All right, so there's a team behind this. So Chris and I co-run Computational Story Lab. Many of the team are here today, so it's all very exciting. We have fun. We're in Vermont. So this is the describe plus explain piece. You always trot out someone that is famous and has a large brain and said something you think is good. So to measure is to know, and if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And we tend to, I would add, ascribe importance to things that we can measure, right? And then we make mistakes about that. Now, of course, he said other things. X-rays were a hoax. There's nothing new to be discovered in physics, right? Just more and more measurement, right? So, okay, so cherry picking from the great man, but he's pretty solid. So happiness, why would we focus on happiness? There was a question early on in a session today about, is happiness important, essentially? And it is, actually. That's what people mostly want if you ask them the right kind of questions. And going back in time, we've had all sorts of people that had pretty interesting lives, possibly not struggling as much as the others, talking about happiness. And you have eudaimonia, going back to the Greeks, which sometimes meant alcohol and food, but generally it was about flourishing. Pursuit of happiness got thrown into the Declaration of Independence, and actually it was added a bit later, right? So there was life, liberty, and in fact it was property. Then there was some editing that went on until they came across the pursuit of happiness. And it's stuck, and it's a good thing to have in a national psyche. All right, so we've done a bunch of other things. I just want to throw this up here. We have this site, hedonometer.org, which is a real-time tracker of happiness measured from Twitter. We'll add other feeds as we go along in other languages, but this is something we're kind of putting up against GDP, right, for example. Good thing to measure. All right, so the root of the essence of it, though, is measuring the emotional content of words. This is not exactly what we presented people, but we went to Mechanical Turk, and we took with us 4 corpora of English. So it's Twitter, Google Books, and Twitter for a couple of years, Google Books for hundreds of years, music lyrics for 60 years, 20 years, the New York Times. And we found the most frequently used words. And we took the 5,000 most frequently used words from each corpora, put them together, and the union of those gave us just over 10,000. And then we asked people to evaluate them on this 1 to 9 sad to happy scale. So 5 is neutral. So I'll be using this scale. These pictures come from Scott McCloud's 2006 Making Comics book, which some of you may know. Okay, so this is what you get out. It's very reasonable at the ends, right? So these are the most positive words. Laughter, happiness, love, it's all good. Rainbow is in there. People like weekend. So people respond well to these words. The other end is also very reasonable. This is down the bottom is the bottom, right? So terror, suicide, rape, these are all bad things. No one would disagree, and that's what we found. Where there is disagreement is kind of interesting, right? So you can look at the standard deviation of people's scores. And so we get a kind of a funny set. We get swearing. People are all over the place with that one. We get alcohol, so a few vices in there. We get McDonald's. We get zombies. Zombies, for some reason, got thrown in. They're not sure about zombies. We get ways to run large societies. So the religion, Christ is in there. Oh, the Beatles got thrown under the bus. Islam, capitalism is in there as well. So, all right, so it's an interesting mixture. We'll look at these things in different ways. Okay, so this is the first thing I want to show you, and it's just taking these 10,000 words and just plotting the histogram of their individual average scores, right? And so the first thing you see is there's this positive bias, right? 5 is neutral, and there's a bit of a positive bias over here. So these bad words are down here, good words are down here, but there's this, it's the stuff in the middle that's the majority of it and more interesting. So all right, so we're social organisms, and I think that's nicely manifested in our language as we see it in this very sort of simplistic way. But we haven't really accounted for frequency of usage here, so you can't quite do this. This is sort of wrong, right? Okay, so you break it into the 4 corpora, which are at least somewhat self-consistent. Music lyrics is everything from Norwegian death metal to gospel and soul, so it's a bit of a composite, and we've broken that out in various ways. New York Times, Twitter's up there, and Google Books, and you see again they have these positive biases. They have some slightly different shapes. What's maybe a bit hard to tell here, but I'll show you with plots involving jellyfish in the next few slides. That these symbols show you what the first 1,000, the next 1,000, and the next 1,000 in terms of frequency of usage, what those distributions are like, right? So they all seem to fit. So there's this scale invariance that appears to be the case for the emotional content of language. So rare words have this positive bias, commonly used words have this positive bias, and all the way through. So you can do that in a more slightly refined way. So again, the distributions are at the top, and these are deciles. These are our jellyfish plots. And you see every little point there corresponds to the rank of the word in terms of frequency of usage, and then it's happiness this way on the x-axis. And then, so we take groups of 500, so a sliding window of 500 going all the way down, and compute the percent or the deciles for those guys. And so you can see that they're fairly consistent, right? It's not that rare words have a disproportionate sort of negativity to them or positivity to them. It could have been, well, a number of these things. But it's very stable. There's some fluctuation for some of the lowest deciles, but that's pretty much it. All right, so this is blowing up. This is this kind of a sophisticated, this is a sort of a Wordle for grown-ups, if you like. We like to try to make these things. So you see, yes, so there's war and funerals are common, they're common words and they're negative. Love and so on up there, and you see things like succeeded and pleasure down here, and wars is less commonly used and negative, right? So that's fun. I'll show you a nice one for Portuguese later on. So that's sort of the setup for that one. You see the same thing for standard deviation. There's kind of invariance, again, in scale. This is looking at standard deviation of the words, right? So the somewhat controversial words are out there with higher standard deviations, but it's somewhat robust. So let's move beyond English. All right, English is now back in this top. We're making this mistake again of kind of putting everything together, but it's a good way to start. English is in the top left, then we have Spanish, Portuguese, French, Arabic, and Indonesian. So overall, you see, again, this positive bias, right? You see some nice pieces, and I'll have a summary that figure that will kind of get at this. Spanish has a nice breadth to it, and so does Portuguese. So Portuguese is Brazil, really, and this is South American Spanish. So the evaluators were in South America, yes. French, nicely, is a little bit tighter. It's a little bit of a Gaulish shrug built into the language. And then you can do all these plots again. So if you look at Spanish, they have that same this is where we really have to go, of course, go into the corpora. So this is a Google web crawl, Twitter, and Google Books. They have that same scale invariance within corpora. This is French, so you can see how it shrinks in a little bit. It's the same selection, Google Books, Web, and Twitter. Portuguese, you can see how it's broadened out. That's the top two. Indonesian is here. We have things like movie subtitles, for example, for Indonesian and Arabic. So interesting, different collections. Spanish, again, showing you the robustness of the jellyfish plots. So this is Portuguese. This is this kind of word shift, this word graph thing, this Wordle thing. So they have these KKKs sitting out here, right? Which I had to look this up, but this is ha 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 ha, right? They also have ha ha ha, but KKK is very easy to type, so they can really, make them very long. Ha ha ha, you can kind of blow up on and make mistakes with. So, but this is like, I guess. All right, is that fair? So yeah, and you get some really, you get 140 KKKs pretty easily. So some of these, of course, I can't read at all, and I can't get MATLAB to render Arabic at all. It's just a disaster. So that'll take me about 48 hours, and I will enjoy the result. Okay, so this is putting everything together for all of these different corpora. The red line going through the middle is the median, so they're ordered by median as you go up. This is just yet another jellyfish plot. And they're deciles again, so you can see they kind of jumble around. Spanish is doing very well for itself, and so is Portuguese there. They've got the best medians. And then you see a little bit of a mixture, right? So English is in there, and French moves up. English music lyrics, again, including some very bad things that started in the 70s. Kind of bringing the happiness level down. All right, anyway, it's a good thing to look at. All of this does play into this other crazy thing we've built, which we're calling the hedonimeter, but it does have, and I just want to touch on this, there's a whole huge amount of work that we've put into this, and it's, there's a lot to do still. But what we found is there's actually a kind of an instrument-like quality, a very physical instrument-like quality to what you can make with this measurement of happiness, in that there's a tunability to it, right? So what we can do is, this is these kind of distributions I've been showing you over and over. This is for English. If you throw out the middle set of words, you can use them as kind of stop words, right? These are the sort of neutral words. Throw them away. They don't count as much. And actually, as you tune that window out, you get the same patterns. And it's a bit like changing the contrast on an image. It's really like you can sharpen the boundaries up at the expense of having less data involved, right? And so eventually it kind of turns to static. But it does have this tunability to it, which I think, so there's more to do with that, but I think it's a very interesting aspect. All right, little bonus at the end is we've been playing around with some other emotions. And so this is just, and there are some bad things, of course. So anger, we asked people to rate these 10,000 words. We've done a couple of thousand so far, right? And anger is there. Disgust has some pretty clear things, right? So we have, and these are the ones that aren't disgusting to people. So happy doesn't make people angry. Piano doesn't make people disgusted. Hawaii is doing well for itself. It's nice as daughter-in-law play idea. So this is all good to see. Good to see. Well done, people, right? It makes you feel better about people. But asshole is disgusting. Okay, good. I think we'd agree about that. So banana makes it in as a very non-fearful word. Bath is there, although my children a few years ago would have disputed that greatly. Beans and Johnson, which separately evaluated, of course, but it could be complicated as a pair. No surprise by themselves. Slap and earthquake and lottery get in there for being surprising. So, this is turning out to be an interesting thing. So you can play around with this, and one thing is to try to render this in some way. So we're trying to now kind of get the emotional picture of a text or whatever it is. This is the word earthquake. So it has a lot of surprise, fear, of course, sadness. There's a little less disgust and low on happiness. So we can play around with this. These are proposed units of measurement, right? So the gr, the u, the wa, the eek, the wow, and the ha. So it'd be good to have a unit of measurement with an exclamation mark in it, but we'll see what we can do. If we can, the SI people will let us in. Anyway, so earthquake, and so these are pictures, and it's taken from McLeod. It has this, because these emotions are embedded in our features, right? This is the story of them, that they're actually, they're very primitive. I mean, disgust is bad stomach. Very, very primitive kinds of elements for organisms. And so they're actually manifested in our faces. So this is very nice work done by McLeod. So here's just a few more examples. So laughter, you can see, has a little bit of surprise in it. So you can start to look at the shapes, right? These emotional shapes. I mean, obviously, there's just a sort of an enormous amount of madness that's going on. But war and tortured have a similar kind of feel to them. So you can kind of explore the network of emotions potentially with this. So rutting is more on the disgust axis up there. Lottery gets surprise and happiness. And this is an interesting one. So this is veterans. We wouldn't have been able to get this with just this, I think, really with the sad to happy scale, because now sad and happy they're separated out. People are evaluating veterans separately for sadness and separately for happiness. And so you see a bit of sadness and a bit of happiness, which is actually kind of pity, right? That moves into sort of more of a pity kind of feeling. All right, so there are lots of things that we have. I mean, aside from this, of course, but we love language. It's good fun. So we're going to evolve this hedonimeter business. We're going to add more languages. There'll be 13 in total. Very interested in Russian, which is coming along soon, in particular. There should be some other good ones in there. So we'll have Korean, German, lots of others. These other emotions, we have to sort of kind of search that out properly. Other streams, of course, we have Twitter, but it's not all about Twitter. And we've made some headway with meaning and context and phrases and so on, and that's a much more complicated thing. But there are some very nice patterns, and we're trying to get to stories. So I think that's it. We have papers, we have some nice press, and so on, and you can explore these things at onehappybird.com, which is our sort of main blog, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have time for a few questions for Peter. Go ahead.
Very quick one. I didn't get how you assess the emotional content of a word.
So we're simply presenting words, and so there was a scale. We're simply presenting words. People's non-mechanical Turk for English. The next one we've contracted with a company, actually. It's been done much more, in a more sophisticated way. So they're given 9 points, and you say this. You think this word is this one or this one or this one.
That's not done with the computer, but by people.
Oh, very much by people. Yes, yeah. People. This is all about people. This is all about people. Yeah, socio-technical computation. The computers are good, but it's a people thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you find any other biases when you did the other missions?
So this is just, honestly, I just made this in the last few days. So this is just, we'll find out. It does seem that the negative ones, so there are 4 negative ones. Surprise is kind of a, in-between character because it can be allied with happiness and the negative ones in different ways. So the other 4 seem to be there. So, something like war maxes out all of the negatives. So we're exploring the ones that have, and we have to do 8,000 more words, which cost money. So there should be a batch of words that really just maximize some of those individual emotions, and we'll sort of be able to set. But there's a whole network, obviously, of emotional space that you could kind of map out. There's the other issue is to try and find out if these emotions can be kind of extracted from data, by some horrible machine learning process or something. Right? I mean, we could do that as well. But these are taken from psychology, from anatomy, and so on, physiology. These are human things, yeah.
2 questions. One, what are words like that seem to be neutral, like the or articles with no meaning? Independently, do they come out?
As neutral? Yeah. So the is 4.98. And so it gets thrown out when we go to the hedonimeter thing. So it's funny because so the ones at the end have very low standard deviations because they're at the end, and the ones in the middle you see 2 types. You see a range. So you see the ones that are very controversial or varied in opinion, and then you see So we somewhat idiotically put up the and of and let people say what they thought. And
Another question, if I can squeeze one in.
I think you're good.
I wonder if there's correlation between words being older and their
Oh yeah.
value on your hedonimeter.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Entered the language and see
We could look at the Latinate ones versus the Germanic ones, right? The Norman invasion business, right? So you could kind of, that would be an interesting thing to play around because you have those pairs, right?
And it might just be that there's some dynamics as they age, maybe they become less angry or more angry.
I don't know. Some of them are very old, like war, I suppose. Yeah.
One of the things more surprising for me was to find that in the graph of the newspapers is positive bias because newspapers give very bad news.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, no, fair enough. So it's the New York Times, which is the paper of record, and so it's everything from it, maybe except ads. I think we cleaned it. No ads, right? And but that includes a lot of things. So sports, cooking, science. Science is full of cancer, of course, so that's not good. But So it's a real melange. And then we do have these other ways of looking at which words are contributing. So I haven't shown you those.
I was thinking that maybe that when you use a positive bias word like democratic, in the newspaper they're writing this procedure is not democratic, so that's a negative.
I can tell you that we've done some other work where we look at a word as it's embedded in sentences and look at how, so an individual word score correlates with the spectrum of words around it. And so you see, actually, all the political ones are negatively correlated. They're all bad. So Democrat, Republican, no one likes them. Yeah.
We do have time for a few more questions. Go ahead.
Okay.
You looked at all the results based on age or geography, so maybe certain age groups find certain words more positive, or certain geographic regions might use certain words.
So that's very natural, right? So the instrument has these two ends, right? One is the evaluator part and then the text. And the problem is it's really, really expensive, even on Mechanical Turk. So I think, that long term you have to do that. You have to do that, yeah. We've looked at the expressions that people of different ages use. And so you see, actually, from what we see, it's different to what people self-report. So people tend to self-report this kind of U-shape for life, which is not what people expect, actually, theoretically, the psychologists and so on. We see this. So middle school is a disaster, right? They're talking about sick driven, but fat and sad and lonely and all these things. And it's all there, and we get some variation with age. That's another piece. But you're right, you want to make all these, so these evaluations for Spanish are from South America, and then you'd have to be careful about that. But there's a lot of robustness. So for instance, you can translate into different languages and see it's pretty solid. Yeah.
Do you have any concern that what you're seeing is a bias toward happiness in people who volunteer their time to
Sure.
the emotional content groups?
Well, we could analyze Turka Nation and see what the comments are like, because there's sort of a union of people who do this. It's the problem of every survey, right? I mean, at the very least, you've got the people who will take surveys or will answer the phone. I don't think so. I mean, when you look through the words and you look at the ones that fall slightly to the left of negative and slightly to the right, it's not unreasonable. It's not as if you're thinking, these guys really, they've taken a negative word and shifted it across. There's definitely this neutrality in the middle. There are the controversial ones which are harder to understand, but the ones that have a smaller standard deviation, it's pretty sensible. But there's the whole Pollyanna thing that people tend to, the Pollyanna hypothesis, that people tend to just talk about good things, right? So maybe that's true. I mean, we are social organisms, right? And it's sort of, maybe that's what we're seeing. But it is interesting to see it in places that, like, the New York Times, these other venues where you think maybe that wouldn't happen.
Do you consider like a spaceship or resolutional view or happiness index, say like the average happiness of what's going on in Twitter, and then some external event happens and then the happiness goes up or down?
Yeah, so actually what you see in general for the whole thing, it's mostly, the dominant user population is the US. So you see those things. So what you see is Christmas, 4th of July, they all pop up. So predictable annual events, they're all positive. The only one in the last 4 or 5 years that wasn't was the royal wedding. But of course, everyone knew that was coming. And everything that's a big drop is a shock to the system. They're deaths of celebrities, they're natural disasters. The one that people always get a little bit, because this is a simple kind of thing, is the death of Osama bin Laden. What really, the text of that day is full of negative things about a negative character, so it kind of comes out as a big drop. And then you can look at the words and see what's going on. But we do have, so in the fourth talk, we're going to see a lot of geography-based stuff. So you see, so we had some work, I don't want to spoil it. Lewis is going to tell you what where we have 360, I'll say this, 360 cities for the US, GPS data, of course the states, and you can rank them, you can do this, and you can actually start to do things like kind of almost get demographics out of it, but not the happiness thing anymore, but just word usage. You can correlate all sorts of demographic data with what people say.
Okay, we're gonna stop there. Peter can't field questions on any topic, but we'll stop there.
I just look downwards.
It just didn't matter.
Yes! Oh man, this is not as cool. Not so good. Ow! The statement's timed up to a no.
I'm really sorry, but I don't want, I mean, I want to go over the mountains. There's a part of me that wants to go over the mountains.
I've just pushed my head into a rock.